Welcome to Debra and Peter are doing a podcast. I'm Peter and you're Debra. And Debra, how are things? You've been away on a birthday holiday.
I have, yes. I've been off for a couple of weeks. We had a week away in Greece, which was really lovely. And then coming back, my mum has been in hospital. So I've been sort of racing up and down to Southampton to see her. So it's been kind of a mixed holiday, really, although she's doing well. So that's good. It's really interesting about holidays because it took me years and years and years to actually properly take them. And what I mean by that is I would go away on holiday, but I would look at my emails every day, even though I had a perfectly competent team left behind who knew what they was doing. You know, I was never really worried that things would go wrong in my absence, but it was just kind of this obsession you have as a chief executive is that I've got to know what's going on all the time. And of course, all that happened was it just meant that for years I was just knackered constantly because I was never, ever properly switching off. And I think, you know, I get a lot of feedback from chief execs in the sector, Peter. I don't know if you have the same about how difficult they find it to switch off, but I've really learned, you know, the importance of that actually stopping and trusting your people to run the gaff in your absence, because, you know, if things do explode, they will get in touch with you. But other than that, you really don't need to check in. And it's particularly important for me because I think I've spoke to you about this before, Peter, but I had a massive breakdown in my early 30s. And it turns out I'd been living with a quite severe mental health condition for years, but I hadn't known it because back in those days, you couldn't really talk about it like that. And one of the things that was, you know, really, really clear is you've got to stop. Although, quick, funny story. So I was very, very unwell and I wasn't hospitalised, but I wasn't allowed to live alone. So I had to go and live with my parents for a while until, you know, the doctors deemed I was well enough to be trusted, you know, to like navigate my life myself. And I was at home with my parents and I was in the bath. And my then chief executive, a chap called Tony Morgan, rang my parents' house to check in on me and see how I was. So my mother came up the stairs holding the phone saying, "Debra, it's Tony, it's your boss." And I'm like, Mummy, I'm in the bath. I talked to him. She said, "Well, he know you're in the bath." And I'm like, so I ended up having to talk to my chief executive, sat in the bath, actually sat naked, terrified of moving, or thinking like, if I make any splashing noises, I think I got away with it. But I'm like, what's my mother thinking? When you talk to my chief executive while I was in the bath. Thank God we didn't have video calls in those days because we really would have fallen out. But anyway, all of that story aside, how incredibly important it is just to stop. And I stopped for 2 weeks. I haven't really looked at anything. I linked in a tiny bit, but not very much. And I came back to discover everything was fine. Some things have gone really well. Yeah. Some things are a bit more challenging, but everything is absolutely fine. So I just think it's so important. I don't know how you find taking holidays and stopping properly, Peter.
Well, I am not a poster boy for mental well-being and taking breaks, actually. And I find some of this, you must take your breaks and I'm switching off now and all of this really a bit much. Some of the most stressful times I've ever had in my life are family holidays. And the idea of the three of us going away somewhere for 2 weeks fills me with absolute dread. So actually, we just don't do it anymore as a family. We do things in twos because when we do things in twos, we aren't playing one off against the other. And I do find it hard to switch off, and I find it quite stressful if I don't know what's going on. So I am that person that's checking in all the time, even when I don't need to. And actually, it's worse, I think, for me to try and switch off completely. So that's a bit kind of controversial and doesn't go with the mood of where people are mostly these days. I did take 3 weeks off last year at the suggestion of the chair of trustees, because we agreed that people needed a break from me, even if I didn't need a break from them, and B, because we wanted to test how the organisation managed when they knew that I wasn't around. And so my uber task focused mind thought, well, that's okay, we'll do that because that's what the business wants and needs. So having been instructed to do it, I did it. and it was refreshing. And like you, I came back and some things had gone really well and some things had gone less well. And I had a handover meeting with the person who'd been in charge while I was away. And some things they told me, I thought, well, that's absolutely ludicrous. I wouldn't have run it like that or done it like that. And other things I thought, oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have interpreted in that kind of way. So we're all different, and I'm sure it is correct that it's really important to take time off. I suppose in my mind, variety is the spice of life, and it's really important to do different things. So I need to be busy, but I'm not thinking about the NSPCC 100% of the time, 24/7. I am thinking about county cricket and music and books, and so I think that finding ways of switching from one thing to another, even if you're not switching off. But when you were, did you seriously manage to empty your head of work for that week that you were away and not think about it?
I was thinking about new approaches. I was thinking about what we can do next year. I was having ideas about what new products we can put on. I was thinking about challenges. Of course, what I wasn't doing was checking stuff. I wasn't looking at my emails. I wasn't there. Yeah, I mean, I like you. I cannot stop thinking about the sector, and I can't stop thinking about DSC because it just means so much to me. And it is, like you say, it's definitely a part of our lives. But I think you're right. A change is as good as a rest. But Peter, this does fill me with horror a bit, because you are rapidly approaching not being really allowed even to think about NSPCC at all. I mean, you've just had your last big speech, haven't you?
Yeah. I suppose I have decided that the way to stop taking responsibility for the NSPCC all the time is to stop being responsible for the NSPCC. So it's slightly drastic, though it's taken me 11 and a half years. But yes, it's an interesting time. So last week, the chief executive designate, Chris Sherwood, who's coming to the NSPCC from the RSPCA, he had his first meeting with my executive board without me. And that was a bit weird. And I left them to it and I went home, and the next morning we had an executive board meeting and I didn't ask what went on and they didn't tell me what went on. But I'm sure it was all fine. But that did feel like a moment when I was out of control. So that was a bit weird. And then, yes, I've also had my last NSPCC annual council meeting, and that was quite a big deal because that's the moment.
How did it go?
Yeah, it was fine. It was really good. I mean, they gave me a standing ovation, which was I felt I am not worthy, and I spent most of the time they were applauding, telling them to sit down. And someone said to me afterwards, "Why on earth did you do that? Because you're never going to get that ever again." And I suppose it's just you feel like there's so much still to do, and you are a small part of everything that's going on. And one of the things that I have felt in these set piece sort of annual speeches is that, as well as accounting for yourself, it's really important that you create energy and urgency about what's to come, isn't it? Which is quite a difficult balance to strike, because if you don't leave the supporters with a sense that there's lots to do and these are the things we need to do now, then what's the point in them supporting you and being with you? We might as well close the charity now. But at the same time, if there's so much to do, it feels overwhelming, then what on earth have you been up to for the last 12 months? So I've got quite practiced over, well, this was my 12th annual council meeting speech, thinking about what have we done looking backwards and what do we need to do looking forwards. And so I did put quite a lot of effort into what was a scripted speech, whereas other occasions you can just pitch up and wing it. and offer a few thoughts like we're doing on this podcast,
Yeah.
I
Although
suppose.
I
But how
can't
do you prepare
do
for big speeches?
I can't. I mean, because the way I speak makes it sound as if I'm just making it up on the spot. But I don't. Like, I will absolutely practice and rehearse every speech I give. There's nothing that makes me more stressed than the expectation that I'm just stand. I make sure if somebody comes and asks me to speak, I need to be briefed. I want to know, okay, what is it you want me to say? What are you hoping for? And it's funny because I mean, Jose will attest to this, like so many speeches, like over the course of my career,
Yeah,
hundreds of speeches all the time. And I know that I do quite a good job at them. I know typically, I get quite a good response. But I hate doing it. I feel sick with nerves before every single one. My palms sweat, my knees sweat, for goodness sake, Peter, and I feel sick. Once I'm up there and I'm talking, typically I forget that I'm nervous because I'm very
right.
focused on the people in front of me, and like, they're all looking at me. I think, how I need to help you. What can I say that's going to make you feel that there's hope and all the rest of it? So I'm typically not nervous when I'm delivering, but the minute I stop speaking and I say thank you for listening, I sit down, I'm back to shaking and sweating, thinking like, what if they don't like me? And of course, Peter, you will know, yourself that I can be a bit Marmite. There are some people who think, what I say and the way I say things is absolutely marvelous and they love it. And there are other people who really can't bear it. That's to me. So I really, really don't enjoy it. But I have learned to lean in. So, like, for example, I was giving a speech earlier this year for Charity Retail Association's massive conference. There are about 370 people there up in Harrogate. Gorgeous venue, really interesting people. And but what happened was, so when they give you the speaker's water, what happened was somebody had given me a bottle of fizzy water. And there was no time for me to say, can I have still? Because, of course, I don't know about you, but fizzy
Right.
water makes me burp. It's the last thing you ever put on a speaker's table is a bottle of fizzy water. And I slugged it down before I'd realised that it was fizzy. And I thought, I'm going to burp. I'm going to burp in mid-speech. So I thought, what the hell am I going to do? So in the end, I just told them, I said, listen, I just need to tell you, I've just slugged fizzy water. It's going to make me burp, and I'm likely to burp mid-sentence. And sure as eggs are eggs, about 3 minutes into my speech, there's walloping great laughter and marrow in the middle of a sentence. But fortunately, because I'd fronted it, it made everybody laugh. And I've learned my years of doing all this
Yeah.
has been, just admit you're nervous, which I often will do. I will often stand up and say, I feel really intimidated by all of you in this room and quite scared. And I often get, when people introduce me, like I was speaking for Surrey Community Action just before I went on holiday, and Jason Gaskell, who's the chief exec there, stood up and introduced me and said, oh, this is the marvellous Debra Tyler who will absolutely inspire you and who will leave you with all these good emotions. And I thought, that's the worst way to introduce me, because so I said, it would have been so much better Jason, if you'd said, this is Debra and she's a bit shit, but please be kind to her.
Yes.
And because I said that out loud to the audience, immediately they started to laugh. So I've discovered now that the best way to connect with your audience is just to be completely real about how you're feeling and not try and put on a persona and sort of
Right.
be different. But I don't enjoy doing it at all. I moan, I pose. I'm always saying, like, why did I agree to give this speech? But yeah,
I, th- I
I
think
do
a,
the I know.
I think a lot of people would be surprised that you don't enjoy the prospect of
Yeah.
delivering those speeches, because you are an amazing rabble rouser, and just the sort of person who is booked to please come and deliver an inspirational speech of 15 minutes to these people or whatever.
I say, well, what do you want me to talk about? They'll say, whatever you want to, Deborah, which is like really stressful. So, but
Yeah.
I have to reassure listeners that, and I'm good at it, but I really don't enjoy it. And I do get absolutely terrified. And I've been doing it for decades, absolutely decades. So if you feel nervous, listeners or listener, we know we've got one in Seattle, and we know we've got, the lovely Jan at PDSA. So we know we've got two listeners. If you ever feel like anxious about giving public speeches, it's so normal. The slickest, most professional presenters will often probably be feeling all those,
Yeah.
creaky nerves. And the best thing to do is just to be honest about it with yourself and with the audience.
And prepare. I mean, you have said that
Yeah.
you know
I'll
what you're going to
practice.
say before you step up.
Absolutely.
I think it's really important to know where you're going to start and where you're going to finish.
Finish.
So
Yeah.
that, especially the finish, because the number of people that I hear speak who say very good things and then say, oh, and yeah, and that's it, or go on, are asked to speak for 20 minutes and speak for 35, and it's quite rude, actually, isn't it, to go beyond your allocated slot. So there's no particular reason to do that. But
No,
also, if you've prepared your ending, you know that if it's not going down particularly well, or you
far.
lose your
Yeah,
way, you can
yeah.
always find that exit
Which I frequently
line.
do. I mean, I write these speeches, I rehearse them, and you've heard me, Peter. And then I'll get up and halfway through delivering something I've, written down, I'll suddenly get distracted by another thought and then lose my place. I do that all the time because I get so involved in the audience, so yeah. But yeah, it's part of the job. We have to rock up and do these things, especially at DSC. I mean, it's a core part of my job. Like chief execs generally have to give speeches at fundraising events and, often presentations at council meetings or whatever. But most of them don't have to do it as actually part of their job. And it is, a key part of my role at DSC is being rolled out
Yes.
by my
Yeah.
staff to,
So my exit line for this speech was around fairly early on when I was at the NSPCC. I went to our service centre at Grimsby, and this rather dishevelled looking little girl came out and grabbed me. Well, she gave me a huge hug and then grabbed me by the hand and took me into the building. And I mean, awkward is not the word. And took me to a wishing tree and showed me the hopes that the children had hung on the wishing tree, and she had hugged me because the NSPCC was the one thing in her life that gave her hope, and I was the living embodiment of that hope. And so my message to people was, this isn't just any other job. You are
no,
the hope in little children like hers lives. And yeah, so that was it's more than a job description.
yeah.
Anyway, so that was so I'm edging towards the exit with the NSPCC.
We should rename our podcast once you've left. Peter Unleashed.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows what I'll be saying when
As in,
freed
I'm
from the
really worried.
shackles of the NSPCC charitable purpose.
We're going to stop our lawyers, Peter.
So what else has caught your eye in the last few days?
Well, I'm actually thinking about rich people
Rich people.
and how much we allow rich people to get away with bad things because they want their money. I was thinking specifically actually about this business of Elon Musk not being invited to Keir Starmer's summit. And I've been hearing the commentators, and most of the commentary has been very, very negative. It's like, that's ridiculous. He's a multi-billionaire. We want his money. We want him in our country. And I think the official line from the government is that he doesn't have a UK investment strategy, so we, don't want him. But actually, I think really underlying it is probably this thing, because obviously I personally would say quite key in some of the disruption that we had in the early part of the summer. Quite a lot of the comments he made on Twitter definitely added fuel to the fire. And I think there was a principal thing. And there's a part of me that was sort of thinking, on the one hand, I absolutely get the need for investment and for money to come in. On the other hand, is it also okay for us to like morally compromise ourselves to do business with people whose values feel really wrong? And I was thinking about how much that's a challenge for charities as well. I mean, there was a charity I was involved in where we had a Russian oligarch, and this was before Ukraine, a Russian oligarch who wanted to donate quite a hefty sum. And there was a big debate about the provenance of that money and, was it the right thing to do? And would it damage our reputation if we did? If the charity did take this money. And in fact, from memory, what happened in the end is that we actually took it, and then war broke out in Ukraine, and then we rethunk, and I think we gave it back. But it's so difficult, isn't it? Because as a charity, the money is going to help the people you care about. Like NSPCC, there's a child that's going to be helped with that money. And if you turn down 25,000 or 50,000 or £500,000 because you think the person's a bit morally dodgy, that's £500,000 worth of support that a young person is not getting and could have catastrophic consequences for them. But on the other hand, do we fuel this notion that rich people can get away with absolutely anything because they can always whitewash or charity washing, they call it, don't they? Their sort of reputations by being big philanthropists. And I just think, it's like one of those really, really difficult decisions that boards have to make and are faced with all the time, that are not straightforward, and that people jump in and judge very quickly. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, like any of these things, you need a framework to work within, don't you? And ultimately, the trustees decide. So I have a personal view. I have a framework which the trustees work to, and then there's charity law, and these things can pull in
Yeah,
different directions, can't they? So I mean, actually, there are some quite strict rules about when a charity can turn down money, and you're
there
not
are.
just
You're
supposed to
expected to
turn.
take money.
There was
Yeah,
that fuss, wasn't there, with the remember the President's Club? Uh,
I did. Yes, let's,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, and
Should they
uh,
give back the money? Yeah,
yeah. So I um, we have a regime of red lines and red flags at the NSPCC. So we wouldn't take red lines. We wouldn't take money from pornographers. We wouldn't take money from
obviously.
gun runners, and these. But there are very few of those. And then there are red flags which uh, we might have regard to. And in any group of trustees or officers at the NSPCC, you will get all sorts of different opinions about whether those red flags are significant or not. And you can waste an awful lot of time in trustee meetings or official meetings sharing your own personal views about what is
Yeah,
or isn't acceptable. And in the end, you need to try, I think, don't you, create a predictable framework in um, which doesn't require every one of these decisions to float up to the trustees to decide for
yeah,
themselves, because it's, as you say, it's a really difficult thing to do. And if you have a collective discussion about these sorts of issues at the trustee board about a specific case, you're very unlikely to find that
yeah.
all 12 people or whatever are going to uh, take the same view. I mean, I'm personally, I'm quite narrow-minded about it, and that we have a charitable purpose to prevent cruelty to children, and providing the red lines aren't crossed, I'm sort of predisposed to take the money,
Take it.
and that there are other pressure groups which will stand up for many other um, uh, issues and concerns, and good luck to them. And in my personal life, I may or may not agree with them, but that's pretty extreme, and it's a more nuanced position than that, for
But it's
sure.
also, yeah, but I think it's also, it's the challenge between individual need and societal need, isn't it? It's like, I think it's because these decisions are made individually along the thing, that there are still far too many people out there, rich people out there, who think that they can get away with their behavior because we will still take their money. It's
Yes.
it's a bit the same with like buying goods from companies. There are some really highly dodgy companies, and as long as people still buy money for them, there's absolutely no incentive for them to change. And so that's why I quite like, what's that campaign, that boycotting one where it says don't buy the Mail or whatever because they promote hate. I can't, is it is it Hope Not Hate, or whatever the campaign is. I have a lot of sympathy for that, because the trouble is, like, we all bang on about wanting society change, but provided it doesn't impact us, provided it's not my charity that has to turn down the money, or not me who has to pay a little bit more for my shoes because I don't want to buy them from this particular outlet, which
Yeah.
I know is dodgy provenance. And I think
Mm.
that's the real challenge, isn't it? And that's
It,
and
yeah, it,
any judgmental way. It's really difficult, because I want societal change. So I want to be able to act on principle and say, I will not have anything to do with you if you are racist, or if you are promoting
yes.
hate, or if you're transphobic or anything like that. I want to say that. But on the other hand, I also have to think about the needs of the charities that I'm involved with, because obviously it's not just DSC. And so they're not easy choices, but principles have prices,
Yeah.
and so if we want a principle of a society that is moral and ethical and caring and compassionate, sometimes we as individuals are going to have to pay the price for that. we won't know.
Yeah,
Because
I
we're
think,
human.
yeah, no, that's true. At the same time, it's an imperfect world, and if you don't engage with people in an
Also
effort
true.
to shift them from where they are to somewhere better. Now, if their actions and activities are compromising the safety and well-being of children, or if
Yeah,
they're crossing a red line by being
yeah,
a pornographer or
yeah,
overtly racist, or not even
yeah.
overtly, if they're being racist, then that is unacceptable. So I think, like so many of these
Ah,
debates, in the end, it comes back to is this furthering your charitable purpose
yeah,
or not? And then in one's personal uh, life, you can follow whatever principles you want.
principles.
That does
Yes.
sound a bit pathetic when I uh,
Actually,
when I play it back, but I just think that there are, there's a huge job to be done by some of our organisations, and if we go too narrow too quickly, then we can't do anything like the amount of good that is
well, we had
required
the
of us
same
now.
debate about, yeah, we had the same debate at DSC about staying on Twitter. You know, lots of our colleagues in the sector said, no, right, we're coming off. You know, this is a vile platform. And we talked about it and thought about it quite hard. And we decided that we wanted to stay there because we felt if we left, it was leaving the place darker. And that part of
Yes.
the job of charities is to go into places and spread the light and to show a different kind of discourse and all the rest of it. And also, the hard practical reality is that we have quite a lot of traction on Twitter, you know, as my colleagues will attest to, and we get a lot of positive engagement. We're not particularly exposed to the hate and stuff like that, but it's hard. But that just gives me, Peter, I'm going to be really super cheeky, and I'm going to say, talking about decisions,
Yeah.
my latest book, I was, we have this speed read series, which are really quick bits of advice about, all sorts of subjects to do with running charities. My latest one is decision making, so it's kind of apt. And I promised
Yeah.
our publisher that I would sneak in a quick promotion of that, just to reassure listeners, I don't make any money out of this at all. It all goes to the charity. So,
And
I'm not.
where do we get a copy of decision making from?
Well, we'll go to the DSC website. Just Google Directory of Social Change or www.dsc.org.uk and go to our publications page and you'll find them all there. Oh, thank you, Peter, for reminding me to do that, because I'd have been in so much trouble if I'd forgotten to say. And obviously, what we'll do is we'll put the links in. And when we publish the podcast, there'll be links underneath as well if people want to buy it. So anyway, so that's my shameless plug out of the way.
Very good. I've got nothing to sell this week. I am wearing this rather fetching NSPCC
Ah,
hoodie, um, which may be auctioned off one day when I move on to pastures new. But in the meantime, yeah, I need it to stay warm, unfortunately.
do you NSPCC merchandise, Peter? Is that part of your fundraising strategy?
Yes, there's an NSPCC online shop, and there are bits and pieces that you can pick up there. I wouldn't say it's a kind of huge money spinner. In
No.
fact, I am unable to go back to the NSPCC branch on Innis Mon, Anglesey, until the NSPCC produces pencils again, which they're able to sell at their
All right, they cost you
at
a
their
okay,
fetes and so on. They give me extremely hard time about us not having enough merchandise, and I think at some point in the past we had a warehouse full of pencils which we couldn't shift, and I couldn't persuade
yes.
the organisation when I came back from North Wales that what we really needed to do was produce more pencils, as a result of which the supporters there were a bit disappointed with me.
Oh, well, we have the same. DSE back in the day, we used to do DSE branded pens and mugs and things like that. And the reality is, it really ended up costing us much more than we ever generated, really. And we also ended up giving loads of it away for free. So, or people half inching, things like that. So, yeah, merchandise is an interesting one, isn't it? I think it works if you're a pop band. I'm not so sure it necessarily works when you're a charity, although I'm sure there are some it works for.
And some amazing NSPCC merchandise down the ages, actually, to coincide with our 140th anniversary, which was the theme of the annual council meeting I've just described. Our archive and library have got a display at the moment at our headquarters in Shoreditch. If anyone is ever interested in dropping by, let us know, with the most incredible artifacts from
Wow.
down the ages that promote the NSPCC in many and varied ways. I mean, there's sort of rich history of efforts to raise money and to promote the importance of the cause, stretching back over that time. And I'm a bit of a sucker for these things as well. If I see old NSPCC milk bottles or tea towels or the like on eBay, I'll usually snap them up. I've got a little kind of collection of my own, but the NSPCC archive is really impressive.
Oh wow, that's amazing. Well, we have an archive of old DST publications in a garage somewhere in Liverpool, I think.
Most of them written by you.
Not most of them, but a few, one or two. Well, that's us done for this week, I think, Peter. Like, again, I don't know how we managed to find so much to talk about, but we always do. And actually, I could have gone on for hours, but we've got stuff for next week that we can cover. Sure.
We'll stop here. Well, welcome back. It's good to have you back. I hope your mum is okay. Yeah, see you again soon.
You will. I'll see you this time next week. Thanks for listening, everybody.